Welcome to the third edition of the We're at the Premier Sports Uncut Podcast. Today, we got a little bit of a local spotlight. As many of you know, I go to the University of Wisconsin River Falls. Today, we have a special guest from the University of Wisconsin River Falls men's basketball team. They'll be participating in the NCAA Division III basketball tournament starting this Friday, tomorrow night. They'll be taking on Bethel tomorrow night. So I'm here with Devin Buckley, and then he's going to stick around and talk some sports with us today and be my co-host for the show. So Devin, first of all, congratulations on winning the WIAC tournament, being ranked nationally in the top 10, I believe top 5, and then making the national tournament. So just got a couple questions here for you. So first, how does it feel to win like the first conference title for River Falls since I think 1983, right?
Yeah, regular season, yeah. It's just amazing feeling, I've been here for 4 years now. We've put in a lot of hard work, and we just continually got better. When I was a freshman, we weren't the best team in the world. Obviously, in conference we were 3-13, and then next year we slowly got better. We went to 10-6, and then we went to 11-5, and now we had a great year, and we ended up going 12-2 in the conference. And I think it just proves that if you do work hard and you take the time to do the little things and do the right things, that you can be a top team in the league. And we established that this year, and now we're one of the better teams in our conference.
Yeah, that's extremely impressive, especially that turnaround. And I know that winning your regular season conference title doesn't earn you an automatic berth to the national tournament, but you guys were ranked pretty high, and it was pretty likely either way, whether you won your conference tournament at the end of the season, you'd probably get in either way, but you guys still ended up winning the conference tournament. Mm-hmm. And that final game against UW-Oshkosh came down to 1 point, and they actually had an opportunity to win with the last second shot. So how good did that feel to beat them after, I think, they beat you the previous season in that same game? Obviously, they were the home team last year, but you had kind of the opportunity to avenge that loss. So how good did that feel?
Yeah, so not only did they beat us in the tournament, but they also beat us for the regular season title last year. So for me personally, this was a revenge game. I really wanted to come out, and I wanted to make sure we got the W, even though, like you said, we would probably make the NCAA tournament anyway. I wanted to make sure that we came out and got this W. So it was an amazing feeling to make sure that we got it done, and my heart was racing at the end because, they got the shot off from where I was. It didn't look like it had any chance, but it came off the backboard pretty quick, and they got the ball, but it was just too late. So just the fact that we beat a team that I really wanted to beat and got that revenge on them, it was a great feeling.
Yeah, and you had some pretty big plays that game, too, that I was pretty impressed with. I think one of them didn't count, but it was like a behind-the-back throw from half court into the net, and you made it. That was pretty impressive. Got to try to get that on SC Top 10.
Yeah, seriously. When that happened, it was just like a thing where I saw the clock was going down to 2 seconds, and one of my teammates pushed the ball towards me, and I just thought, try to get it towards the rim and see if we could get an offensive rebound on it and get another possession, and end up going in. It was crazy. When I look back on the film, in my eyes, I thought I got it off, but the refs didn't see it that way in regular time. So, it was awesome that it happened, but didn't count, obviously, but it was cool.
Yeah, it's tough for a ref, especially without having the opportunity to do a replay in Division III like they're able to in Division I. But now you guys are entering the NCAA tournament. So how is preparation for an NCAA tournament game different than preparation would be for, let's say, the WIAC tournament or just a regular season game?
Obviously, there's like NCAA regulations as far as like with practices. We practice at a certain time, and they make sure that we don't go past that time. So today we practiced from noon to 1:30, and they made sure that at 1:30 we were off the court and we couldn't get on the court before noon. So that's something that's a little different, and they block off the window so people can't look in and see what we're doing. But other than that, as far as our team, we like to keep things the same. We do our scouting report at the beginning, watch a little film, then we go through and we just make sure we do the things that we need to do in order to play the right way. So a big emphasis is on rebounding. So this team is, once they get one shot up, they crash really hard and they get multiple opportunities. But our goal is to make sure they get one shot up, we get the rebound and be strong with it and push it at them. So that's one of our main game plans towards this game. But other than that, we try to keep it the same, make sure that we play the same way that we've been playing all year, and that's gotten us to this point.
Yeah, so just kind of focus on yourself, do what you guys do best, and
Exactly.
trust that to win the game. So what would you say is like the biggest challenge you guys have right now entering the NCAA tournament?
I think the biggest challenge is the fact that a lot of people are counting us out. Like, they think that we're obviously one of the number one seeds and one of the best teams, but everybody seems to feel like River Falls is going to get upset early. They don't think that we're anything that's worth watching. And we want to just be the team, aggressive and prove to everyone that's watching that we can actually win this game and win this tournament. I mean, obviously Bethel's a really good team. They kind of I'm not going to say snubbed, but they kind of we weren't too sure about why we ended up getting such a top ranked team first, but we don't care. We're going to go out, we're going to play hard, and we're going to try to get this W. So I think the challenge is just making sure that we can prove to people that we belong here.
Yeah, I was kind of interested about that too, because both the WIAC and the MIAC, Wisconsin and Minnesota Intercollegiate conferences, they're probably two of the best conferences in Division III, and for both of you guys to be the winners of your conference tournaments and then match up in the first round, that was a little flawed to me, in my opinion. But like you said, you guys have a good opportunity against anybody, and I mean, that's got to be a little bit of motivation for people to count you out right away. And then my final question for you about this tournament is, so if you win on Friday night, you get up and play a new team on Saturday. So how do you prepare basically overnight for a new matchup like that?
Well, we'll have a shoot-around early. So pretty much we'll get all our preparation done during that shoot-around. So before the actual shoot-around starts, we'll take about 30 minutes and we'll go over our scouting report and know our matchups and how each player plays for the other team. And then we'll watch a little bit of film on them. Obviously, we're not going to be able to spend a lot of time figuring out what they do and knowing everything they do. And then we'll go to our shoot-around and we'll go over maybe some of their offensive plays and some of the defensive sets that they may run, whether they have a zone or a press or if they're just straight man-to-man. Then we usually end by going over their baseline out of bounds and their sideline out of bounds. But at the end of the day, we've played 28, 29 games now, so it just comes down to playing basketball, and I think that we're obviously one of the best teams in the nation and that we can match up with anyone. So when at the end of the day we play basketball and we go at them hard and try to get the win.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting insight. I guess that was something I was pretty interested about, but sounds like the key to the tournament is basically doing what you do best and against anyone and just trusting that. So since we're on this topic of NCAA basketball, obviously yours is Division III, but March Madness for Division I is coming up here pretty soon, the Division I national tournament. So right now, who's your pick as a favorite to win that?
Well, I'm a big fan of North Carolina Tar Heels, so I never count them out, and I think I'm going to stick with them. I think that North Carolina brings a unique aspect of the game where they never stop pushing, regardless of if the other team makes a shot or misses on them. They like to really put pressure on the defense and try to see if they could get back. And I think they're a sound defensive team with a lot of experience. They got a lot of seniors and a lot of juniors on their team, and obviously they were second place finishers in the tournament last year. So I feel like they're going to come with a little chip on their shoulder because they lost last year, and they're going to bring it this year. So I would say I got UNC to win it.
Yeah, see, this was a tough one for me. That's definitely a solid pick. I was at first thinking about Villanova, and kind of seeing their opportunity to repeat, and then over the last couple of games, it kind of seems like if a team's able to shut down Josh Hart, basically they're able to shut down the team. I think two or three games ago, he was held to 8 points, and the team was held to a season low of 58 points, and they were pretty much able to shut them down just like that. But I think right now I got to go with Kansas. They have two very viable options, scoring options. So if you shut one down, the other guy's there with Mason and then Josh Jackson. They're both really solid players, and I think that they're going to help carry. I think they're both seniors this year, and I think they're both going to help carry that team to the championship. But I wouldn't be shocked if it was UNC and Kansas.
I agree. That's a really strong pick. I think not only do they have those two core guys that can shoot or that can score the ball, but they also have a lot of shooters. So a guy like Frank Mason or DeAndre Graham can drive and penetrate and kick and allow those shooters to make plays. And not only that, they have a guy that's kind of blue collar. And Landon Lucas, I believe his name is, and he's a powerful rebounder, and he really changes things up on the offensive end for other teams because he alters a lot of shots or like even blocks them. So I think that is a very solid pick, and I could see them winning the whole thing too.
Yeah, I also wouldn't really mind seeing, which I'm kind of a fan of the underdog, I wouldn't mind seeing a last seed in the tournament just kind of sneaking in and winning a bunch, rattling a bunch off, and then winning the whole thing. That's obviously highly unlikely, but I think that'd be cool. Just kind of sticking with this topic since we're talking about these all-star players and stuff. Who's your pick right now for Player of the Year?
Well, I'm going to go back to your pick for the NCAA tournament to win it as a team in Kansas, and I'm going to say Frank Mason. And I think Frank Mason is a guy that just brings toughness to his team. I think he's one of the toughest players in the country, actually. And he does a great job of scoring, obviously, averaging 20 points a game. But I think he really runs the offense well. And with him on the court, they have a better flow. And he does a lot of little things. He averages 20 points a game. He's got rebounds and assists. I don't know the exact totals, but he does that. He's aggressive on defense, has a lot of steals. And I just think Frank Mason is a guy that has proven himself to be a consistent player, and he's proven himself to be one of the best players in the nation. So I would pick him as my Player of the Year. Yeah,
and that's who I would pick as well. He's obviously stepped up. The main reason is because he stepped up so big in so many moments, especially at the end of the game. He's really, instead of calling on somebody else, calling on his teammates, he's called on himself and created not only baskets and shots for himself, but he's created shots for his teammates by calling his own number and really stepped up big at the end of the game. The close second for me right now, it was Josh Hart, but honestly, I think it's got to be Caleb Swanigan from Purdue.
Purdue, yep.
He's
double machine.
Yep, he's averaging a double-double right now. I think he's had a couple 20-point, 20-rebound games. I think he's had 4 of those this season. But the only reason he's behind Mason for me is because his team is not nearly as good as everyone else's. And I think to be the best player in the nation, your team has to basically correlate with your playing style.
I agree with that.
Right now, he's not the main focus on his team, so that's why he's a close second, but definitely second to Frank Mason.
And another guy you could throw in there, maybe Luke Kennard. The guy, he's very young, but he's a very talented player, and he's one of the most efficient players in the NCAA. When it comes to scoring the ball, he can do it in many different ways. He can get to the basket. He's a great three-point shooter, one of the best three-point shooters in college basketball, and he's a great free throw shooter. So it's pretty much impossible. I'm not going to say impossible because anybody can be guarded, but it's nearly impossible to guard this kid because he just can do it all. And then if you foul him, he's making his free throws. So I think he's a very solid player, and like you said, he's playing for a good team. So I think he could be up there in the conversation also.
Yeah, it's going to definitely come down to what happens down the stretch in these conference tournaments to see who it ends up. But I think both of our picks and Frank Mason, I think he's going to end up being the winner this year. So just kind of talking about all these different options for College Player of the Year this year. You know, last year's senior class, junior class, last year's draft class, everyone thought had a lot of star power. Mm-hmm. But this year in the NBA, all these guys really haven't produced much. The only 2 rookies this year that are averaging over 10 points a game are Dario Saric and Joel Embiid. Embiid's only played in 31 games. Now he's done for the season. And both of those guys were drafted in 2014. So for me, I don't really consider them NBA rookies, especially having had 2 seasons to... I mean, they obviously haven't been on the court, but they've been training with an NBA training staff and NBA coaches. And the next closest to 10 points is Malcolm Brogdon. I think he's averaging 9.8 points a game. And he's played pretty well and pretty consistent for the Bucks, but he's definitely no star, at least as of right now. And then after that, you have Yogi Ferrell, who's only played 23 games this season, and he's averaging 9.5 points a game. and he had 32 in his second game, so that's obviously going to skew his total a little bit.
Yep.
So what do you think's up with this rookie class this year?
It's tough to say. I mean, just when rookies come to the NBA, it's such a different pace, and the guys are way more athletic in the pros because they've had time to develop their bodies. They're a lot quicker, so maybe it's just the flow of the game that the players aren't getting used to, or I don't know what it is, but it's just you just don't see the players as like you don't see a spark like Towns. Towns was a guy that came in right away and he averaged 18 and 10 his rookie year. You don't have that this year. So, like you said with Joel Embiid, I consider him to be the best rookie in the NBA right now, but I feel like he cannot be awarded the Rookie of the Year award because he's only played 31 games and he played great in those 31 games, but it's an 82 game season. He didn't even play half the games. So that makes it tough for me to give it to him. And like you said, Dario Saric was drafted in 2014, so they've had the time to build their bodies and mature as pro athletes, whereas these other guys they only had the couple months before the season started. So, I mean, if I had to go with someone, I would go with Malcolm Brogdon, just because he's obviously one of the top scorers, which isn't saying much right now, but he brings defense. He's a great passer, and he rebounds the ball. So he does a lot of little things that a lot of the other guys don't do. I think he's a stat sheet stuffer. He's not Russell Westbrook by any means, but he is a stat sheet stuffer. He gets stats in every category. So I think that he is probably the most valuable rookie that's out there today. So I'd go Malcolm Brogdon.
Yeah, that's a really good pick. And kind of talking about what you were talking about a little bit with Towns last year, not only did Towns average over 10 points a game, but there was a total of 8 rookies last season to average over 10 points a game. And the top 3 were averaging over 15 points a game. And that was Towns, Okafor, and then Kristaps Porzingis. And those guys are all still pretty consistently producing. Okafor not so much now that Embiid's kind of stepped up. But now with Embiid out for the season, I think we'll see Okafor shine a little bit and be able to show a little bit more of his skill set again. And then the other thing that I completely agree with, too, is it's definitely got to do a lot with the body maturity of a lot of these players. And, like, look at Brandon Ingram. When you look at him out there compared to a lot of these other guys he's being guarded by, he's a small forward. And look at him and then look at LeBron.
Right.
Like, if he's trying to guard LeBron, he has
a disadvantage there, yep.
Yeah, almost absolutely no chance. So just kind of going off of this, a hot topic lately in sports conversations kind of been, should the NCAA and the NBA change the rules where you have to be in college for at least 2 years before going pro? Or should they let these freshmen still kind of enter the draft right away? I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to make them wait an extra year so that they can mature both physically and mentally, kind of learn a little bit more basketball fundamentals and stuff. But what are your thoughts on that?
I agree that if these players had 2 more years in college, they could benefit from it. But I just feel like it takes away from those players that have the potential to go right away. For example, Kobe Bryant was a player that came right out of high school, and he was not as physically gifted as someone like a LeBron that came out, but he was pretty thin, but he still had some success as a rookie. And I feel like if you come out earlier and you're a player that can play well, you can peak earlier. So Kobe was 17 years old when he came to the NBA. So in 4 years, he's still only 21 years old, but he's playing at a top level. Whereas if you come and you play 2 years, 3 years, or even 4 years in college, you're already 22 years old. So that leaves your span of time in the NBA to be very short. Because I don't know many guys that are going to play from 22 to 42. They'll probably be 22 to 35 max. That's only 13 years. Whereas Kobe was 17 and he played until he was 39, 38 years old. And that's 22 years. Whereas if somebody was 22 years old or 23 years old and played until they were 39, it's a lot less years. So I feel like if the player is good enough to play at a high school, then let him play.
Yeah, I agree. They need to make some type of rule where kind of like what they did with Thon Maker this year, where he was basically able to appeal the fact that he was old enough and eligible for the draft, even though technically he hadn't played college basketball. So maybe they should make the appeals process a little bit easier for those guys like Kobe, like LeBron, those type of players that have the ability to come right out of high school or freshman year of college and jump right into the NBA and compete. Just kind of talking about rookies and stuff, let's change the sport a little bit. So obviously the NFL scouting combines taking place this week.
Yep. And
there's been this new rule that took effect this year, and that's the rule of if you had any type of violence, history of violence in your record or weapons charges in your record, then you're not allowed to go to the combine. And so two big names were banned from the combine this year, and that's Joe Mixon out of Oklahoma, which I think with good reason, and Chad Kelly, who had a little bit of a different story, where Joe Mixon had a video of him punching a woman, and then Chad Kelly, there was a video of him in a bar fight, but the reason he's banned from the combine is because he was brought up on charges for supposedly threatening the guy he got in a fight with an AK-47, but there was no evidence that he actually ever had a gun or anything like that. So that's kind of interesting to me because you're keeping two of the best players out of the combine, and this is supposed to be basically the show for the best players and kind of get the 330 best college football players there in front of these GMs, scouts, and coaches. And like yesterday, the Lions GM had an interview, and he was saying that basically that exact thing, where he feels if you're going to bring the 330 best players, then you should bring all 330 best players. And now because of this rule, potentially the first or second best quarterback in next year's draft class, which is Baker Mayfield, who's been a Heisman finalist 2 years in a row, is potentially going to be banned from the combine because he was just arrested for, I think, a fight, and then he ran from the police and stuff. So what is your thoughts on that? Do you think they should let these guys in the combine, especially if they're going to let them have a pro day? Either way, they're still showcasing their skills, and it's not like they're keeping them out of the NFL. These guys are still going to make a team.
Right. Well, I'm not a football expert by any means. I played football up until 9th grade of high school, but I mean, I know a little bit about the sport. I like the sport, and I think that they need to find a different method, because at the end of the day, these coaches and GMs don't care whether if the best players at the combine are there or not. They're still going to select them. So I feel like if Cam Newton wasn't at the combine, he would have been a top pick regardless. So my thing is that it doesn't matter if the player is at the combine or not. They're gonna draft them either way. So I think they should come up with a different method. Maybe first couple games of the season they sit out, and then that may make NFL executives think twice. Like, okay, if they're sitting out the first couple games, this might sway whether we want them or not. Just something that takes away from them. And because if they're gonna go and do things that they're not supposed to be doing, they obviously need to be punished and have a consequence for them. But I just don't think that this is a big enough thing where even the players might not even care that much, because, like you said, they're gonna have a pro day anyway. So all they're doing is just giving them time to work out by themselves and make sure they're ready for their pro day. And half the time, the best players don't even go to the combine. If I'm right, Jameis Winston, was he at the combine?
Yeah, Jameis Winston was.
Can you give me an example of, there's a lot, I mean, I can't think of any, but there's a lot of players who don't go to the combine and just have their pro day.
Well, yeah, a perfect example, last year, Tyreek Hill.
Okay, there you
go. I don't think he went to the combine, and this year, and he was one of these players, actually, obviously this rule just came into effect this year, but he was one of these players that had a history of domestic violence, but he just wasn't invited to the combine because he was kicked off of his team for a year, and then he went into a smaller Division I school, was drafted in the 5th round by the Chiefs, kind of was quiet for the first couple games, but then towards the end of the year, had a couple kick return, punt return touchdowns, a rushing touchdown, a receiving touchdown, really helped the Chiefs down the stretch. And it seemed like all of his fans really forgot about why he was drafted so late. Like, obviously he has a ton of talent, but he basically beat this woman half to death. And yeah, he served a year punishment in college, but I think that if you're going to try to punish them in the NFL, then, like you said, they need to have a suspension in the NFL. They can't just be punished from the combine. And that's another reason kind of people lately have been talking about how relevant is the combine if you have your pro day. And the majority of scouts now are basically doing everything off of film. For me, I think the combine's still relevant, not in the fact that it's like the dog and pony show, like the 40, the bench press. No one's really going off of those. To an extent, there's charts and stuff that people say if this guy that's this size doesn't run this type of 40, he won't succeed in the NFL based on 95% of people that were outside of that category didn't succeed. But what they are doing there, which is all behind the scenes work, is these GMs and coaches have the opportunity to take these players and sit down and ask them questions and see how mentally prepared they actually are to be in the NFL. And so that's where I think the combine is still relevant. And kind of like you were saying, these GMs and coaches, they're still going to draft them, but if you're going to lose them for 4 games, it's definitely a lot. Why would you waste a draft pick and pay them the money that you have to pay a draft pick when you could just sign them for the minimum as an undrafted free agent?
Exactly.
Do you think the combine's relevant in the way that I'm talking about, kind of more behind the scenes, or do you think that the 40s and stuff matter?
No, I would agree with you. I'm not really a big into the 40-time guys because a lot of guys that run the 40 and have low times can still play. If you can play, you can play, regardless of whether your times are outstanding or not. So I'm more into like the other drills as far as like with a receiver. Who cares about his 40 time and how, as long as it's not obviously like 6 seconds, because he can't get by anyone. But as far as those drills where they show you how your route running is, they show how your catching is, and like you said, with a lot of players, how their mind is. With a player, they have to be mentally prepared to come into this game. And the NFL is no joke. A lot of these players are hard-hitting players and a lot of trash talking. You have to be mentally prepared. And there's a lot that comes into the game as far as like with a quarterback or someone or like a linebacker where they have to know, well, pretty much any football player, but mainly those guys have to know a lot of plays and they have to know every position. So if you're not mentally prepared to do that, I don't think they're going to be able to succeed in the NFL. So I would agree with you that the mental aspect is a big part of it, and that the combine is not only how fast you can run and how many reps you can push out in the bench press.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a perfect example of the fact that there may be one of these guys that falls outside of that category that can still play, and a perfect example of that is Antonio Brown. He ran, I think, 4.65 40 or something like that. It was on the slower end, especially for a guy his size who was coming out of college considered a slot receiver, but he just became the highest paid receiver in the NFL for a reason. So yeah, exactly. Those charts, they work maybe 95% of that time, but if you're going to solely base your decision off of that and miss someone like Antonio Brown in that 5%, I mean, the Steelers drafted, I think they had 2 5th-round picks and then 2 6th-round picks that they drafted before him in the 6th round. And, I mean, even like look at Tom Brady. He was definitely outside of all those categories, and he's arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. So, yeah, 100% right. So, this drills don't necessarily matter as much as the behind-the-scenes work and the individual work. So, I think that's all we got for you guys today. Devin, thank you again for joining us. Thank you for the interview, and thank you for the insight on the NCAA tournament, and good luck tomorrow.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I thank you for having me today. It was fun, and I hope to be back again soon.
Yeah, you definitely will be. And thank you guys for listening. Let us know how we did today. Let us know your thoughts, and let us know if there's anything you want to hear about next week. And again, thank you guys for listening.